So Billy Samoa, thank you for joining us today on the pod. Really appreciate your time, buddy. So thank you for that. So where do we find you today? I think you're in LA, is that right?
I am in Los Angeles. It's a beautiful day here. No clouds to be found. And I just took a little drive earlier in the day and I was like, man, this is the day you want to visit Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Hey, it's interesting, right? Like we didn't even think about the timing of our discussion today. And you guys have gone through an election. And it's finalized, and you now have a new president. So that's there's something interesting to talk about on today's episode for sure.
You're right about that. It's an interesting time. I feel a lot of different emotions, both myself, but those around me, and it's gonna be interesting to watch how things unfold. I'll tell you that. It's must watch TV, as they say.
All right, so there's a lot of things I want to talk about today, Billy. You've got an illustrious career, if I can use that word, right? Everything from filmmaking. Yeah, I've been stalking you. I checked you out. Working for one of the largest renewable solar companies in America, Solar City. A pivot to Tesla as well, head of global sales. That must have been a huge role. And now you've done another pivot and you're working for yourself as an entrepreneur with Spotify. But where I want to start is... talk to me about the movie. That was in 2009, am I right?
That's when it got released. We started it though in 2003. So wow. We started writing it in 2003. So it was a long journey from the writing and then the pre-production, and then we shot it in 2005, took it to festivals in 2007. We did show once in Australia, as well as a few other countries around the world. And then in 2009, it was picked up and got released on Netflix, Amazon, all the different platforms. And we did a small theatrical run as well. Yeah,
that's amazing. That's amazing. So I'm thinking you're a creative. Would I be right in assuming that?
I've always had a creative bend, like whatever I get my hands on. Like we just did last week, it was Halloween, right? So we did a big haunted house in front of my house. And my son, he's 12 years old. It just lights him up to have this event at our house that hundreds of people come to. I think what it comes down to is I like seeing people's reaction, and I like creating things that will make people blown away, will give people that sort of wow effect. That excites me.
Yeah, great. Excellent. So are you still doing films? Like, is that still part of what you do?
Not in the same way that I did. So my role now with Cast is helping with, I would call it more video and shows that happen to be a podcast form, but in a wide range of varieties and genres. So it's still creative, but not in the same way that I made a feature film.
Yeah, great. Look, I haven't seen it, but after this and this weekend, I want to go check it out. So I can probably still find it, yeah?
Yep, you can go check it out. In fact, if you want to go see it, the easiest place is YouTube. So it's rolling. Yeah. It's about ecstasy, the drug, and it follows the lives of 8 ecstasy users over a 24-hour period, their lives intersecting at a warehouse party here in Los Angeles. And the character is the drug, and the people come from varied backgrounds, and they talk about their experiences on the drug. There's the drug dealer who's used it a million times, and then there's the person who's a school teacher trying it for the first time, and everything in between. And we get to see how their lives intersect at this party.
Look, I'm a creative, right? So I love that. You know, I was a musician for the first half of my life. I'm 127, so that was quite a few years. And I'm super pumped about talking to creators, right? Because I think there's something a little bit special in that. But what happened to you is that you did a pivot. You went into a corporate gig, right? How did that come about? Talk to me about that.
Well, independent movies might surprise some people, but they don't necessarily make a whole lot of money.
I knew you were going to say that. I didn't want to go there, but I knew you were going to go, oh, okay, it was really tough to make any money.
With 7 years of my life dedicated to the project, I had to look back and say, was there 7 years worth of income? And even though the movie got picked up, it got released. I mean, not many people could say they have a movie that's on Netflix, that's in theaters and all those things, but I didn't really have 7 years worth of income. And so when I pivoted, I got into the renewable space. I started in sales, worked for a small solar company, broke the record for most sales in the first few months. And they're like, you're pretty good at this. Why don't you teach people? So I became head of training. And then they had me manage a team. That team broke the record for most sales in the month. They're like, okay, you're the leader of sales. I became the VP of sales. So I went from making independent filmmaker money to making the most money I've ever made in my life because I got into sales in a vehicle that would allow me to leverage the skill sets that I developed. By the way, when I was making movies, I had to make some money. So I worked in restaurants. I was doing things that would allow me to learn the skills necessary to have interpersonal communications. And that's working as a server. What I learned as a server paved the path for everything I've done since, because I learned people's expectations. I learned how to meet those expectations and exceed them. I learned how to ask the right questions to understand what they want, and then to actually think about what they might want before they even know they want it themselves. And I think I look for that every interaction that I have, is how do I make myself valuable to those who I surround myself with, and whether it be a server or it be in sales where I try to accommodate their needs, or as a business owner where I'm trying to serve my clients. I'm always looking for ways to like give them something that they may or may not know they wanted or needed, but when they have it, they're grateful.
Creators make good salespeople, right? Because I think creators are normally naturally curious. You know, they're quite inquisitive. And I think they make relatively good communicators. Some of them could be highly emotional in a sales team, I get that, but I think they have the right stuff to be in sales. So, hey, can I ask you a question? When it comes to working in a role like that, especially in sales, right? And the kids should understand this. And then you're doing something you're passionate about, but you have to earn money. What's your take on the premise, which I hear a lot from young entrepreneurs these days, is do what you're passionate about, right? Just follow your passion. What's your take on that statement?
It's a good question. I actually interviewed a guy named Mark Schaefer who wrote a book called Known. And he suggests, and I agree with the suggestion, is find something that you have a sustainable interest in. And whether it be a podcast or a business or a creative pursuit, what do you have long-term sustainable interest in? We can have lots of passions. The passion itself can still exist or be present, but what do you have a long-term sustainable interest in that would provide some form of value to those that are around you? And so if you look at a Venn diagram and say, what is that interest level in one big bucket? What are you good at? What's a skill that you have that you're uniquely qualified? And then what do people need, right? And where those different circles intersect is a sweet spot for you. So again, what do you have a long-term sustainable interest in? What are the things that you're great at, that you, or I would say world-class at? And then where does the market need you? And I think if we're looking for career specifically, try to find something that fits in the middle of those three circles, and that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's on point. I remember seeing an interview with Scott Galloway, and he was talking about actors, right? And actors in the elite across America. I think it's SAG-AFTRA, I think is the union in America. And he was saying that, you know, the majority of those people in that union only earn $26,000 a year on average, right? And then I think about, okay, well, you have to be in the top 3%, like at the top, maybe even the top 1% in that top echelon to really be financially successful in a creative field, right? And I think young kids, you know, hey, I really like acting, or I really want to be, you know, a professional basketball player or a professional musician. And I think that can be misleading for them if they run into that for too long, because eventually you have to pay the bills, right?
Very true. And you look at other professions too, like real estate, for example. Real estate looks amazing because you see all the people who are making incredible money. But the reality is, if you went all real estate agents combined, I think the stats similar to that. They might make 30, 40 grand a year. And most people don't start real estate to make that. They started it because they think they're going to make a whole lot more, but they lack either the skills, the tools, the work ethic, or another variable to get to be one of those elite performers. Don't expect because there are elite performers in a profession that you are going to be an elite performer. You could be, but you got to make sure you have the right things in place to get there.
My take is like, give it a year, right? I think just do it for a year. Like, don't overcommit to it, and then just see what happens. And I think people underestimate the amount of work that you have to put in if you want to work in that top 3%, how hard it can be. I was at the gym this morning, and when I'm sitting there, right, and I'm looking around, there's all these 22 to 25, 27-year-olds in there, right? I'm thinking, shouldn't they be at work? But what I'm starting to notice with, with the open doorway of social media, a lot of these young people are creating their own businesses, right? And they may not be generating a lot of money, but they're generating enough to be sustainable. So the whole market's starting to change. Like they've got drop shipping stores, they're moving into influencing, they're doing all these things, which, look, as I said to you, I'm over 150 years old. That wasn't around when I was a kid. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for these kids. What do you and what's happening in the States in terms of, do you see the entrepreneurial market changing and there's more opportunity for these young entrepreneurs?
Well, I think going back to your previous point, which ties nicely into answer that question, is I think people are more willing to try new things, to try different things, unafraid to pivot if it's not going the way they want. And because there are so many options available, they have the luxury of starting and stopping. And I think we kind of get into this myth that, the only way to fail is to quit, which I agree that is true. However, you may be trying to make something work that's not the right fit, that's not the ideal fit. Vehicle matters. If you 100%. Find the right vehicle, you're able to do a whole lot more. I mean, you could work infinitely harder in one vehicle and not see the results, and work. And I'm not, advocating, to not work at all, but also like be smart about it. Like, you're not living your life so that you can work for work's sake. You have the ability to do really anything you want. And if you give yourself the chance to try different things, you're going to have more opportunity and more options. And I always say, one of my mentors he said this to me when I worked at Solar City. He was the CRO at Solar City. He ended up starting his own business. He's now multi-billionaire, actually. And he started a loan company, super successful guy on the Forbes list, the whole thing. He said, winners have options. Winners have options. And it's true. If you're a winner and you have the mindset, you always have another option. And so to answer your question, I totally see what you're saying with the younger generation. I look at my son who's 12. I see way more opportunity, even from when I was a kid growing up. I wanted to be, like you talked about, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. Could I have done it if I dedicate? Maybe, but the chances of it happening are this big. And the chances, so it's just give yourself a greater chance for success. Try new things, experiment. I'm a big believer in experimenting and pivoting.
Yeah, I think you're right. The vehicle matters, right? And it might not be sexy and it might not be glorious, but when you do something for long enough and you become successful in it, you become passionate about it. That's what I think. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I could tell you this, getting a paycheck and that paycheck growing is a pretty damn good motivator.
Yeah, 100%.
Look, when I was in my early 30s when I pivoted, or maybe like late 20s when I pivoted into the solar space, and instantly my income flew through the roof. Now, if you asked me a year earlier, would I be in solar sales? I would say, well, what's that? Yet when I did it, you feed a excitement motivated side of yourself by seeing success, by seeing money coming in, and it does drive towards a point of passion because you're accelerating towards something that is meaningful to you. And let's face it, they say money doesn't buy happiness. Well, I think within a certain range, it really can afford you more opportunities for being real about it. As long as you're past a certain threshold, I think where people get it wrong is if you're so rich to where you've lost purpose and you don't have anything fulfilling you. I get that there are some people who they're no longer happy. But also, there's truth in the reality that if you afford yourself opportunity in life by putting yourself in a financial position to not have to worry, I think that's a good place to be.
People who say that statement, money doesn't create happiness, well, they probably don't have any. And I don't mean to be mean. I don't mean to be mean when I say that, but maybe there's probably a barrier there for those people, right? But hey, talk to me about doing shitty jobs. When you just mentioned that, you had to go from doing something really super creative and then having to pay the bills, right? And I always say, I coach a couple of young entrepreneurs and I say to them, you know, you've got to do dumb shit. You've got to do hard shit. You just can't do all the great, sexy stuff. Like, you have to do shitty jobs, right? To make money. You have to do that to be sustainable. Because they think they just want to get into the YouTube business, you know, get 1 million followers and start to sell them product. I said, yeah, look, that's great. You know, I think there's a time horizon to that, but you know, the mindset should be, I've got to do whatever it takes. So I'm going to work at nights and I'm going to do that during the day, or you're going to flip it and do it the other way around and really grind that out. A lot of these kids don't want to do that. What's your thoughts on that?
First, I agree, because you're going to learn something that you didn't know you were going to learn by putting yourself in that environment. You get more opportunity by doing more things. And so whether it be working as like I was as a server, or working in some kind of job where you're interacting, guess what? You may meet somebody who could open up a doorway of an opportunity that could completely change the trajectory of your life. Whereas not doing it and kind of hoping's not a plan. You can't just hope and think that things are going to go the direction you want, but not actually do something. So to your point, when you get opportunities, and it may not be the most glamorous, exciting, it may not be your dream job, but that job could be the job that leads to something else. It could lead to something else because of the skills you develop. It could lead to something else because of the people you meet. It could be that it motivates you to go get another job doing something else, because when you leave, guess what? You got to do something else. So look, I think resistance to hard work and to not working at a place that is not your ideal job, it's like trying to find the perfect home. It's not going to happen. You're not going to find the perfect home because it doesn't exist. There's always going to be something you don't like about the home you're seeking, just like there's always going to be something you don't like about the job. And I'll say one other thing. When you start a new job, you most likely, not even like some of the time, almost all of the time, you're going to hate it for the first 2 weeks to a month. And I had this happen even when I went and transitioned from one solar company to go work at Solar City. The first month I was there, I wanted to leave. I said, I made a mistake. I want to go back to my previous company because that was comfort.
Can I just interject? But why?
Why did I want to go back?
Yeah.
Comfort. I seeked comfort. I seeked familiarity. I had my friends there. It was cushy. I had a good thing going. I'd been there for several years. I was making multi-six figures. I was in a good place. I didn't need to leave. This is why winners have options, right? So I had this option to go. I got a bigger company and actually a lesser title, but I went because I saw more opportunity, and I got there and it wasn't what I had envisioned. I think we often glamorize where we're going or what we're doing or thinking it's going to be one thing. And then when it's not that one thing, we start to doubt. Give yourself at least, I would say 60 days. 60 days is not a lot of time because you never know what can happen in that 60-day period. You could get promoted. You could validate that you're in the wrong place and then you leave, or it could be that you just needed to adjust. And so that's why I say, give yourself a little bit of time. I almost went to my previous boss at my old company. I literally had an appointment set with him. Had I not done that, I would not have been promoted. I would not have led Solar City TV. I would not have worked for Tesla. Would not have led global sales and training teams. All of that wouldn't have happened if I decided that I didn't like that transition. So you give yourself a little bit of time. Time will help you understand, is it the right or wrong decision?
Scarcity and fear, right, stops people from taking that leap. You know, I think most entrepreneurs that I know, we're risk takers, right? We just dive in head first, but I know most people are not like that. It's pretty scary to move from a cushy job, like you said, with a great salary and give that up for something that you're not sure about. But that's where the magic is, right? I think that's where all the opportunity presents itself. So it was great that you did that. So you moved into at Solar City, Senior Director of Training and Development. Like, that sounds like a big role, right? That's a pretty big role. So give me some context around that. What did that feel like and what were you doing?
So I started in internal communications, so the head of internal communications, and then I was promoted to be the head of sales training. So when I started, I created a TV show called Solar City TV. And what was cool about this was that I got to work directly with all of the executive leaders. So Lyndon and Pete Rive, who happen to be Elon Musk's cousins. I don't know if you know the backstory of Solar City, but Solar City was started because Elon went to Burning Man with his cousins. And on the way back from Burning Man, they said we should start a solar company. So Elon, I think, gave them some seed money. They started the company. And then flash forward another 10 years, I started working there. They needed a way to talk to the large organization. It was about a 16,000 person organization at the time. I said, I have a background in film and production. How about we create this Solar City TV? And the idea behind it is it's kind of like an ESPN style show where there's 3 cameras, a control room, this charismatic leader who was the chief revenue officer. And then every now and then he would bring Pete or Lyndon on. And it was an amazing experience from a personal career standpoint, because all of a sudden I went from working for, it was a smaller solar company. We grew it to be the 5th largest, but now I'm working for the largest solar company in the country, company that's related in some way to Elon Musk, doing some pretty cool and innovative things. There was a little bit of whispers that Tesla might buy the company. It was an exciting time to be there. And yet, guess what? When I was doing it, I don't think I fully appreciated it, because I had to, my commute was a plane. I would wake up on a Monday morning and I would fly there, and I'd spend the next 3 to 4 days there, and then I would fly back. And so from a personal travel standpoint, it was a lot because I lived in LA, but the office is up in San Francisco. But I look back and I say, I kind of pinch myself and say that was an amazing part of my career journey. And so just remember that as you're going through things in your career, you may not realize what a cool thing you're doing at the moment. It may not hit you till later down the road.
Yeah, you're right. And I think a lot of people miss that, right? Especially at startup, right? You know, they go, oh, well, this is really hard. This is struggling. We've been doing this for 3 or 4 years. It's not really working. And they jump off the ship a little bit too early. And then they miss the real magic stuff. Because it always doesn't happen in year 1, 2, or 3. Yeah, I remember Solar City and Elon's involvement in that. And I remember him launching, you guys launched those solar tiles, right, for homes that looked like tiles, but they were solar panels. And that was super innovative. I remember watching that on YouTube. Were you with the company when that innovation was happening?
I was, and this is a little fun fact. I probably shouldn't share it, but I'll share it anyway. So first of all, one thing I learned about Elon is he's never satisfied. He always will push you. So I know we came back, and I wasn't part of this meeting. This is more being close enough to what's happening to understand. We would keep sending him prototypes of what it would look like, and it was never sleek enough. It was never. It always looked like a tile, like a traditional tile, and he hated it. And you know he's all about design and aesthetics, and so he would not settle, and kept on pushing the team to innovate and to make it better than what they were presenting, until finally he was satisfied. And then when we did the event that you talked about, that event was shot at the Desperate Housewives movie set. So
oh, really?
or TV set. Yeah. So, and frankly speaking, we were still early on. The solar roof exists today, but at the time it was very much in prototype. And Elon famously, he is a natural promoter. He promotes what he does. I don't know if it's natural or if it's just something that he's developed, but he's able to create excitement about the products that he's releasing, even if those things aren't ready. When I went to the semi-truck event and I got to see the new Roadster, which was a surprise, by the way, nobody knew it was happening except for, I didn't even know it was happening. And I was the head of product training. So I was like, I didn't even know it was happening. And the Roadster gets dumped out of the back of a semi-truck. It was the most exciting thing you could imagine because no one knew it was happening. And this is why I think surprise is such an important factor in what we do professionally. When we could surprise someone, and it could be something as small as working at a restaurant and doing something that they didn't expect, or something grand like being at a unveil where people are expecting the semi truck, which is cool, but all of a sudden now you have the semi truck and the Roadster. Or for me, when we transitioned from Solar City to Tesla, I was the person in charge of creating the experience that welcomed people to Tesla. So we had thousands, like 6,000 people on the sales team at the time, and I had to lead the event. So I said, how do we do something that Elon would do to make it special, to make it wow worthy? So I literally drove a Tesla Model S onto the stage, and we were playing like Thunderstruck. Okay, you'll appreciate this. Playing Thunderstruck. Okay, we're doing it at a big warehouse. The warehouse garage door opens up. There's hundreds of people in there, and then it's being broadcast to all the people throughout the country. And then I drive the Tesla up on stage, and then I lead a presentation with a lot of the executives and people like that. But I could have just said, hey, we're going to start this meeting. We're doing a webinar. But no, how do you push the envelope? How do you do the unexpected?
Yeah, that's incredible. Also, it's incredible that the size of the team was 5,000 or 6,000 people. That's enormous.
Yeah, no kidding. It was a huge sales force.
Is Elon still part of Solar City? I know he still sits on the board, or maybe he's left the board now, but I think he's still a shareholder. Is that correct?
So Tesla acquired Solar City for about $3 billion. Solar City completely doesn't exist as a brand. It's all been rolled into Tesla Solar. And so because he's head of Tesla, still, of course, oversees that. And it's been some years since I've been there, so I don't know his involvement. But as you know, he's got so much going on. So I would guess he has lieutenants that are the main people handling each of the business units, Solar being one of them. There's a lot, by the way, you could just research it. A lot of people think he overpaid, that it was a bailout, a lot of talk about the acquisition. So, but again, it fits into the grand scale, mission of accelerating man's adoption of renewable energy, and so that's really everything that he's doing involves that.
So how did the pivot from Solar City to Tesla, how did that come about?
This is the power of networking. Okay, so this is a great story for somebody that's wondering how to move up within the company you're working for. So I've never asked for a promotion, not even one time. I never asked for a pay raise, not even one time, but I got a lot of them. I think I was promoted 8 times from the time I started with Solar City till I left Tesla. So when we were Solar City, I had the opportunity to visit Tesla. And at the time I met their head of training. And when I met their head of training, I had lunch with him, got to know him, and built a relationship with him. And then he knew what I was doing at Solar City. So he knew a little bit about my reputation. I built a reputation about putting on events and things of that nature. And so at the time, Tesla didn't have an onboarding program. So when Solar City was acquired by Tesla, he needed somebody to lead global onboarding, the new hire training. So that's where I said, okay, I have to create something that's representative of the brand, which is what I did. I looked at ways to make the new hire experience extraordinary. And some of the things existed already, but we did factory tours. We make sure they got to do test drives of a Tesla. So new person starts day one. If you're in the Fremont area, you're doing a tour of the factory. You're driving a Tesla. You're getting to know the brand in a very intimate way. And so I did that, and then I was promoted and led global sales and product training.
Incredible. So I want to go back on something and double click on it. You mentioned that you have been promoted about 8 times, right? I find that stuff super interesting. So just to hover on that a little bit, why is that, do you think?
Well, this goes to leadership in general, but also applies here. It's the decisions you make and the interactions that you have. And so for me, decisions I made, and this goes for followership, but also goes for why I was promoted. It can be used for both scenarios, meaning people are going to follow you based on the decisions you make and the interactions you have. And this is just an innate thing that we do as human beings. We want to follow people that we trust. We want to follow people that we believe will make the right decisions. And we want to make sure that they're not going to put us in harm's way. And so I believe the reason I was promoted is because decisions I made and the interactions that I had. So interactions would be, I had an interaction with somebody who was that knew one of the highest people at the chief revenue officer at Solar City before I got my promotion to be head of sales training. And they raved about the work I was doing. And it put me on the map. So instead of me promoting myself, other people were promoting me. The other thing so that's the interaction piece, like getting to know people and building those relationships. And then the decisions are, like, let's put it this way. Doing a training, you could do a boring training, but instead of doing a boring training, when we were doing role playing, I created a role play scenario that was like American Idol, where I said, American Idol allows us to put within a container a fun way to give feedback. So now it's Randy, Simon, and Paula, who are the trainers, giving feedback to the new hires that are giving their sales pitch in a fun and exciting way. Or at the end of the week, we would do Family Feud, where it's one side of the class versus the other side of the class. And it's how those two sides fight each other, really, to showcase their knowledge. That's a lot better than taking a test or doing some exam. So it's just like, how do you bring the fun in? How do you surprise people? So those are decisions that I made that made the training more memorable, that made the training something that people wanted to, they would rave about it.
Yeah, it's great. Look, it's different, right? It's got a lot of energy around it. And it sounds, you're right, it sounds super fun. And I think, that cultural experience for new hires coming into a company, I think is pretty important to get that right. I think people miss that.
Well, then the other piece to it too is I'll just say this one thing about when we think about why we like our jobs, it's because of the people that we work with and engage with. So, if you're a business owner, or if you're working within a company, and remember that 60-day period that I said you should stick with it, that's when you make your work friends. That's an important part of the equation. So whether you're a person who's planning people joining an organization, or if you're part of a new organization, find people who are your work buddies as quickly as possible. That'll help, because human beings, we're all about connection. The more we connect with other people, the happier we're going to be.
Hey, let's hover on Elon for a little bit. Like, he's a fascinating guy. By the way, I'm a fan of Elon's. I think he's a pioneer. I think he's got a lot of courage and a lot of strength. He cops a lot of flack in the market, and I get that. Has he made some bad decisions? Sure, but we all do, right? He's in the media all the time, so he probably gets hit harder than most. But what's your opinion of him, and based on your experience working in 2 of his companies, and quite senior executive roles? So what's your take on him?
Yeah, when I left, I was one layer removed from him, so my boss reported up to Elon. I admire him tremendously as a visionary, as an innovator, even if he himself didn't come up with every idea. He is an innovator in that he takes ideas that exist and he makes them monumentally better than they would have been. So yeah, Tesla existed before Elon. Like, he didn't invent Tesla, but the company would not be what it is if it weren't for him. So I think he doesn't settle. That's one thing that I appreciate. The other thing is that he uses first principles thinking. So what this is it's our ability to not just reason by analogy. Most people, when they look at any kind of problem that they're solving, they try to make something just a little bit better than something else that exists just like it. So if you use the car example, let's make the car a little bit better than the other cars. What Elon would say is, let's imagine that cars didn't exist and we have to build them from the ground up. What then? With the only limiting factor being maybe there is a law of physics that we have to take into account or something like that. Other than that, anything is on the table. So I think we could use this for problem solving no matter what the scenario is. And then the last thing that I think makes Elon as effective as he is he asks a lot of questions that are extremely thoughtful and strategic. So example would be, we were doing every quarter, we'd do a end of quarter push to get vehicles into the hands of the customers, and everyone, all hands on deck. Even I had an executive role. I would be in the trenches making sure people have cars. Well, in order to get those cars to each of the markets, we would need to have a place to store them. Somebody said, oh, we've run out of parking spaces. There's no more parking lots. Elon hears that and he says, that's an excuse. There's definitely places where we could park cars. It could be an abandoned lot, it could be a movie theater, it could be someplace that's, football field. But to give that excuse is limited thinking. Elon could land a rocket back down to the ground. He has unlimited thinking. That person got fired. And the reason that person got fired is that they are not thinking about, and by the way, very publicly, because you can't have a limited mindset when you work for Elon. So he asked the right questions to get the desired result. He uses first principles thinking. And, you know, as a visionary, I think the key part about him is he's constantly thinking of ways to make something better and never settling. If you never settle, you're going to continue to make something better.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there are famous stories about him, right? Like if you don't, if you're not innovative, you don't think that way, you don't have the right mindset, and you're part of his senior team, you're out, you're gone, right? So,
yeah.
And I sort of like that and I respect that. Like he does walk into a company and he does an assessment and he says, all of you guys have to go because you're not where I need you to be, right? So you're out. That's pretty strong. So were you closely linked to Elon? Like were you in meetings with him, with your teams about sales and that application?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say I got to be on calls with Elon, but not in-person meetings. Very few people would be in an in-person meeting with Elon. My boss would be, and like the kind of first reports, people that would report directly to him. And I'm not saying he wouldn't interface with other people, but I was in the sales side of the equation. Let me tell you something. Elon doesn't like sales. He doesn't think you need sales. So to him, that would be a waste of time. Elon, and I was also in training. Elon doesn't really like training. He thinks everything should be trained through a YouTube video. And so there would be not a big amount of reason for me to interact with him. He would interact with people, so engineers, people that are his direct reports, people that, you know, manufacturing, people if we're trying to make a product better, or if he needed to understand how something worked, there'd even be somebody on my team who really ran all product training. So I oversaw all of product training, but he was the main head of product training. So he'd probably meet with him if he needed to go straight to the source. So Elon, you would meet him if it was very specific. I'll tell you an interesting story about how his security detail works. So he's got two teams that he deploys. I mean, he doesn't deploy, it's all done kind of seamlessly so that he doesn't televise where he's going. So there's one time it's into the quarter, we're at a distribution center, and all of a sudden Elon's Secret Service, basically, his security guards come, hey, Elon's coming, we're just checking. They check everything. He never came. He came a couple of days later, but he never came because they have a whole nother team that goes somewhere else so that he's not televising where he's going next. That's pretty crazy.
Well, that's pretty crazy, right? Smart though, I get it.
Yeah, for sure.
I get it. So it's interesting, right? When you said Elon doesn't like sales, I remember him saying once, someone asked him a question about advertising. It was a really bad interview, by the way. Someone on free-to-air television, I think it might have been, I don't know, Fox or CNN or something like that. And he said, well, we don't advertise. We build a product that doesn't need it. And I just went, wow, that's super, super incredible to say a statement like that. Where most founders, and I'm one of those founders, who are hyper-focused on sales, right? Because that's where the revenue stream comes from. That's where the top line comes from. So that's super interesting. So talk to me about the vibe.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say he says, I mean, he wants it to be it's frictionless. He wants the experience to be so frictionless that you could fall asleep on your keyboard and order a Tesla. And so the salesperson kind of is not needed. So the vibe, was there more to the question or just the vibe of working there? Yeah, it's a good question, man. A lot of smart people. I sort of backdoored my way in there. So that's the way I like to say how I got in. So a lot of people who you meet them and you're like just wickedly smart. Not there are the degrees and all that, but Elon doesn't hire based on degree. But the reality is it's harder to get a job at Tesla than it is to get into Harvard. Like if you do the math numbers, it's that hard. So, because there's a lot of applicants and not many people get jobs there. But that's the thing I miss the most is the people. It's a grind. He models the behavior that he wants others to have, which he's going to fall asleep on the factory floor. and others have done the same. So I would say it depends on which business unit. If you're in manufacturing, you could expect to work 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, 5-6 days a week. If you're in another department, it may not be as grueling from an hour commitment wise, but no doubt there's high expectations. And Elon sort of leaves a wake. So whatever it is that Elon wants, that's what gets the attention at that time, which is both good and bad. I mean, if you think about it, like you want to be mindful of what are the big picture projects that people are working on. And when their attention gets diverted because Elon's flavor of the week comes up, it's going to change priorities. Okay, it's Elon. All that being said, things move fast. Things change fast. There are some cultural issues, meaning that people get burnt out. It's kind of a churn. Like there is a revolving door. Like a lot of the people that worked there when I did, they're no longer there. I was part of a lot of RIFs, reduction in force. My position, I technically my position was eliminated at the senior level. I got a call from my boss while I was at an airport, and they said, I knew this was coming because I had been part of multiple rounds of figuring out who was going to go. I had lieutenants in APAC, EMEA, and North America. So Elon likes a flat org. He's like, why would we need that piece when we could have just the lieutenants in those markets? So I could have gone to work in sales, but I said, you know what? I could take the severance and start my own business and pivot. Like to me, it was a long over. I kind of wanted to ride my corporate surfboard off of the corporate train for quite a while, and this gave me the opportunity to do it. So, you know, I'm amazed that it lasted as long as I did because, like I said, I unfortunately had to remove a lot of people because there's constant changes. You got to adapt or die. If you don't adapt, you're going to die. Bottom line.